and someone else is coming in now, so let them in. And off we go. So welcome along to the under 10s, moving up to coaching under 10s. Very briefly, who am I? My name's Dan Cottrell. I've been coaching for over 30 years. This month, well, September the 1st, we launched our very first magazine called Rugby Coach. And we are now a website, Rugby Coach weekly newsletter, and running webinars, going out and coaching. So lots has changed since then. So what qualifies me in particular to talk about under 10s? Well, apart from the fact that I coached my son through from under 6s to under 16s, and all the joys which come with coaching your own son, who now listens to me, but not at the time. And also dealing with moving up year groups. So that's that gives me some ideas to talk about them. And also another role is that I do a lot of coach education on the new rules of play, teaching the teachers. So I'm talking to teachers 10, 15 times a year and picking up on some of the things that they will face. Okay, a little bit of an outline of what I'm going to cover. I think the new laws will be one of the major points at under 10s in particular, because under 9s and under 10s, this is when rugby starts to look like rugby. And a lot of our training is based on the fact that we are now facing a new set of or additional laws to the ones we had. And we will pick up on these. And obviously the most significant one will be rucks, but also the introduction to Scrum. Then we'll just talk a little bit about where we're going to take the skills, and I've got some ideas around that. There is some tactics, not massive tactics in one sense, but there is plenty of tactics in terms of understanding how we want the game to be played. And finally, I'm going to give you a few ideas on the joys of coaching and managing 9-year-olds moving up into 10-year-olds. What you can see here is that I'm using a Jamboard. So my idea really is not to have too many bullet points on the screen, but instead for me to write. So when we're talking about the new laws, we're going to be focusing mainly on the tackle. Slightly different, because though hold tackles are still in place. Then scrums, because you're going to have to start building scrums. And probably the area which most people will be most concerned about will be the ruck and the maul. And a little bit about what that looks like and refereeing that, because probably on average you will be having to referee sometime during the season. When we talk about the key skills, obviously they fit into here, but I'm going to make quite a focus on handling, because this is a very difficult skill for most players to pick up and develop over time. And in terms of team management, I'm going to talk about expectations. But the most important thing is that everything I say is going to be for you to work out whether it works for your team. And if at the end you want to say, right, Dan, you said this, how does this work for my team? Or I don't think it worked for me. Then I can either say, I would agree, or I might just say to you, think of it this way. So please don't think that this is the only way to coach it. There's more than one way to skin this cat. So let's make sense of the journey first of all before we get anywhere. The first thing I think is very important is to understand that the season needs momentum. And that's why I think you, if you can, is to build your season in blocks. So you've got a first game as your target. Now, it's not the first game we're going to win the game. That's the first game. Let's see where we are by the time we get up to our first game. And you give yourself little sort of skills targets. Have we have we got certain skills, or have they been exposed to certain skills, or can they do these sorts of things? So we could say how many players are in a position to tackle, not to make a tackle necessarily, but position to make it to tackle. And in terms of handling, we might say that it would be a really good target that we were able to get 2 passes away from the breakdown. Now that might be your first game. So that gives you your first game target. Then the next target might be something around half term. And again, this is a little bit more sophisticated on the tackle. Maybe we want to see a few more players making a good grip. Now, that's not to say that some players won't be completing lots of tackles. That'd be great. It'd be great if every single player was making lots of tackles. That's not going to happen for everyone. So how many more players are making a grip? And in terms of handling, how many players are catching the ball? So my pen, I think that's catching the ball off the chest. I'm going to say every single one, and you'll know that 9-year-olds do tend to jump when they catch the ball. For some reason, I'm not quite sure why it is. It's almost excited to receive the ball. And then we'll get to Christmas, and then you can have another target, and then half term after Christmas, and then Easter, which is where you get the tournaments. And that means that you don't look at the player as a whole for the first game. You look at small things, and then you build on that, as opposed to saying, we've got to cover all these sorts of things. Now, in particular, your first game, you will also want to be looking at what a ruck looks like and a scrum. But we're going to keep those aspects very simple. The danger is that we look over the fence at other teams and think, where are they? Where are they? We're not going to keep up with them. Work at the pace of your team, not the pace of everybody else. Because otherwise, what happens is that it's not suitable for the number of players you've got. You may, I'm just looking at some of the teams there. Some of you may have be happy to get 10 people to training, and there'll be other sides I've had online, they've got 45 to 50 players to deal with. So work out what works for you, but we'll come back to ruck and scrum in a moment. The next thing is making sense of the journey is what's the game going to look like? Now, obviously, we're this is being recorded the weekend after England didn't have their best day at the office, and we might wonder what rugby might look like. But we've got to understand, what does under 10s rugby look like? And what is practical? Otherwise, we are chasing the wrong rabbits. So if you're thinking we've got to create 2v1s, we've got to have a defensive line, we've got to develop phases, then you're probably, either you've got a brilliant group and you've got hours and hours of them, but you're probably chasing the wrong rabbit. So let's think what rugby looks like for the under 10s, and not to overthink it, and that they've got to enjoy the sport of it, but using rugby values. And this is where I will say that as much as possible, training needs to look like rugby. Not look like adult rugby, but look like rugby. So what does look like rugby means? Well, number one is use a rugby ball. As much as possible, 95% of the time, use a rugby ball, because they need to get used to the size 4 ball in their hands. They need to get used to being able to manipulate it, to catch it. Catching a tennis ball is good for hand-eye coordination, but it is what's called a far transfer. It doesn't have the same attributes as a rugby ball, so we're using up valuable time developing skills which we could develop through using a rugby ball. So you use a rugby ball. The second thing is, as much as possible, use games which pass backwards. Because this is a really hard skill, because here is a player and they've got the ball, and all their teammates, the people they want to pass to, are going to be pretty much behind them, or they should be behind them. So let's work on the fact they've got to pass backwards. Now, we could use sort of games where you pass forwards a little bit. Perhaps that would be some fun to have. But in terms of if you want to get real learning, real rugby learning, use a rugby ball, pass backwards and score tries on lines which are in front of them. Not lines to the side, but which are in front of them. Because that's what they've got to do. They're going to play plenty of other games where the try lines are to the left, to the right. They're going to play on circular pitches, triangular pitches. These are all good things. For me, if I had my time again with my son's under nines, and I think we did this quite a lot, but I've had my time again, I would rugby ball all the time, try lines in front of them, and pass backwards, because that is the core of the game. You even look at the international level. There was a moment in the France game. France are playing absolutely magnificent rugby. The fullback makes a break, and he cannot make a pass of 3 meters to a player in space. Now, high pressure, but that is the skill. Run forwards at pace, pass backwards. The more we can do that, the better. So the final thing on here, and I'm going to move quickly on to the laws of moment, is it about player development or team development? And it's not a versus. We've got to look at each player as an individual. They will be going on their own little sort of journey of discovery. And I use discovery in very loose terms here. But in terms of, let's say this is skill here, whatever skill looks like, and this is time. You may well have seen this little chart, is if they start here, they're going to be moving up, we hope, like this, but it's going to be a very wiggly line, and sometimes they're going to just drop off rugby altogether. So we can't treat everybody the same. So to a certain extent, we have to understand that they're going to be on this wiggly line. And the second thing is that we've got to help the player understand, and it's really hard for an under 10 to play in and as part of a team. So you're going to start to see players who are not going to be so selfish, but you're still going to be frustrated because the really fast runner, what's he going to do? He's going to get the ball, and here he is. Here's the fast runner. There's the defense, and he's going to go and go all the way around there. Or alternatively, the really big boy is going to catch the ball and get a run straight. So we're going to be sort of introducing the team field. Right, the big one, the new laws. Numbers, pitch size doesn't make much difference. It just gives me one more player on the pitch. That's great. Let's have a look at, I didn't put scrums in there. Let's have a look at this 1v1 contest. Now, in under nines, you could have held the player up and the ball could have gone away and tackled. Now, it would be interesting to see how often this happened in your games. But now, generally, the tackle player will go to ground. I'm going to talk about ball presentation a little bit later on, and a ruck will be formed. A tackle situation will be happen. Now, originally, there was no contest over the ball, but now one player from the attack and one player from the defense they are now allowed to compete over the ball. And when they make contact with each other, you have to bind on when they make contact with each other, then that is now a ruck. One player from each team in contact over the ball. The players on the floor, well, this player who's the defender, and it's very unlikely, but this player defender, if they then get up and then compete for the ball, this means that this player cannot compete for the ball because it's a 1 versus 1 over the ball. Even if this defender is very, very quick and they get up, if they then compete over the ball, that's the 1v1. So we're going to come to the ruck skills in a moment. In terms of refereeing it, you're going to find that players are going to arrive and add accidentally to the ruck. Some knowingly, quite a few completely unknowingly. It'll be in the future, you'll hope that lots of people will make an effort to join the ruck, but in this particular case, it's very likely that players won't know how many players to go in. You've got to manage that by just sort of gently getting them out of the way, not physically, obviously, but by the language that you're using. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can help your team become better at 1v1 rucks. We can't control the opposition. It could be possible that they have 2-3 players joining just because they're inexperienced. They don't understand the game. So there is a ruck. When is the ball out of the ruck? Well, if you're refereeing, I would be very lenient in terms of the attack. I would say I will call when the ball is out. Only because it just keeps these players. So if this is the attack going this way, let's say they've won the ball. It just means that the ball is able to get away from the ruck situation and the game plays. Otherwise, we don't get the ball away. Now, this means that we need to develop the 9s passing skills. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit of time. So that's the ruck. Now, what also is going to happen is that the players can now rip the ball. So a player who is held by a tackler, and remember that they have to tackle below the ball. They can't actually rip the ball, but the next player in, as long as they're not tackling the player, can come and rip this ball off. So that this tackler, they look more like a monkey diving in there. There we are. There's a bit more of a figure moving in here. So there's the ball carrier holding the ball, and it is definitely below the sternum. The next player can come in and rip the ball. A maul is ball carrier in contact with a defender plus 1 attacker. It's not 2 defenders. 2 defenders can be in there because you can have the tackler and the ripper, but it has to be an attacker in there as well. Now, mauls are a complete pain. I don't teach mauling at under 9s. It's a waste of time. You teach, obviously, wrestling for the ball, but I don't teach any mauling. Mauling only really becomes a part of the game at under 14s. So let's not waste time on that. We've got so many other things to do. Let's focus on rucking. So we're going to talk a bit about the full tackle. We're talking about 9 passing. And the final thing is we're going to have scrums. And here is what's going to happen. Here are the players here. You call a scrum here. So knock on. And some of these players will race out of the way as you're turning around. And then the slow players, probably the players who should be in the ruck, will just say, yeah, you 6 are the scrum. So the ruling is it's the nearest 3 from every side. I think that's a great idea. I genuinely think it's a great idea. I think that players will run away. I think coaches will even coach players to run away. My own view is that you say to the teams beforehand, right, everyone's going to number off on the pitch. So we've got 8 on the pitch. So you are 1 to 8. You are 5 to 9. You are 1 to 4. So let's identify players. You're 1 to 4. You are 5 to 8. When we have a scrum, first scrum, this group comes in. Second scrum, this group comes in. So even if a player is number 8 over here and it's the second scrum, they've got to come in for the scrum. So you've got 3 players in the scrum plus 1 scrum half. It just means that more players get involved in this, and it's very important. The benefits are going to be great as you go through. If you're playing against a team who wants to win, they may complain about that. And you say, well, you choose who you want to have in the first 4 and the next 4. Make sure you've got a couple of quick runners in both so you don't get disadvantaged. Right, skills focus. The new tackle laws, well, it doesn't really affect the under 10s game in the sense that these players have ingrained habits of tackling above the ball. The key is that players should focus on tackling below the ball. That's all you've got to really think about, tackling below the ball. There's no handoffs at this level, so they're tackling below the ball. How do you do this? For me, is you do a lot of tackling, focus on your feet tackling. Because the hardest thing is to bend to make the tackle. So if we spend a lot of time focusing on tackling when the players are on their knees, they're already bent over. So that's a skill that they don't have. The next thing is that they can't move around very much. So really because the key thing is the head. To move your head, you've got to move your feet. So we want to try as much as possible to move on the feet. And a webinar, which is going to be coming up quite soon, is on tackling, how to introduce tackling and to work on tackling. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it in here. But for me, is try and spend as much time tackling your feet. And if the player tackles too high on the ball, use positive language or positive reinforcement. Don't say that's a penalty or that's dangerous. Say, where's the better place to make a more effective tackle? And just really give them a chance to make amends in a positive way. I see some coaches immediately that seen that with the new rules say we'll be penalized for that, and it just makes the players more nervous. Right, so the scrum focus is, I think every week you should spend a little bit of time on initially what I would call the scrum profiles. So just getting used to the right shapes for the scrum. So that's the first few weeks. Remember, we're trying to get to the first game. So they're not having to push against each other, but they get the scrum profiles. And the key to a good scrum profile is all around bending at the hips. If you can get players to bend at the hips, then a lot of good things happen. And that's all around changing the angle of the sternum. I'm not going to go through that now. There's some stuff around that on the site, but bend at the hips, the skills focus there. So a couple of minutes every week on that. And then before the first game, you just get them to be able to bind together. A very simple bind together. So they're in threes, and then they bend at the hips to get the ball in. It's a feed, it's not a strike, so you don't have to worry too much about the hooker. Hooker skills can come next year. So your contact focus. This is probably where a lot of coaches will spend more time this year. There'll be something they'll be worrying about. And I'm not going to say anything different than, it's not necessarily you need to worry about it. It is something which you will be focusing on. How do you get the players to ruck? So for me, I get the players do a lot of bear crawling. So if this is the ball and this is the player presenting the ball, so we're playing this way, so that's their head and that's the ball. The player arrives in a bear crawling position. Try and get the angles of the legs right. That looks roughly like a bear crawl. Bear crawl, and as they reach the player, then they rise up into a scrum profile. So they go from a bear into a scrum profile. And that means that they arrive low. Otherwise, what we have is we have players arriving at the ball and going from this position to this position. And that's just not effective. You're not going to win many because you're going to expose the chest. And as soon as you expose the chest, then you are it's easier to drive back. So bear crawl and then rise up. And if they're bear crawling, there's more chance that if this is the ball on the ground like this, being presented and you're playing this way, if you can get your chin over the ball and then your hips over the ball, that is very, very strong. Wherever your chin goes, the rest of your body goes. Where your hips go, the real power goes. So chin and hips over the ball. And I'm going to do a tactical focus on the next page. And the handling focus, well, here we've got to work on the 9 pass, or the clearing pass. That means everyone Everyone should be practicing this. Now, what you're going to have is some players are going to be better at it. And they're going to practice at home. They're going to be going home and they're going to be spinning the ball. That's fantastic. The more we can encourage that, the better. But in training, everyone should be used to arriving at the ball. And I have a term which I need to say slowly, is I get the players to sit, shoot. Sit, shoot. So when they arrive at the ball, they sit when they arrive at the ball. So that means that they drop the hips and they then go down to reach the ball. They don't have to have the ball on either foot, but they sit. And then when they pass the ball, and they rise up as they pass the ball, so this is not very well organized, but here we are over here, they then shoot their hands towards the target. And the very fact that they're shooting the hands means that they are generating some speed. Now, the better players may start spinning the ball. So sit, shoot, and that should give them a bit of a better accuracy. And that's where I would go on the handling focus. And then in training, as I've said, do lots of exercises where you're passing backwards. Tactical focus. Play off scrums. You're not going to have moves, but this is a good way to set up. There's your scrum. You're putting the ball in from this side. That's right. Yes, that's right. You're putting the ball in from this side, so whoever's been, and then you're receiving the ball out here. The best place for your next receiver, your first receiver, they've got to be 5 yards back, is behind. Now, you might say, well, I want to go out away from the scrum. Well, that would be great, but behind means that this is a shorter pass. Mathematicians will be thinking Pythagoras immediately. I'm going down the adjacent, I think, going down the adjacent rather than the hypotenuse. And that means a shorter pass. If you've got a more confident line, then this back will be here. And I would say that as a target, this player here should always aim to pass the ball to the next player. Now that is, if you can get that, that would be great, because I said about team, and the more that you can pass, the more the team is involved. Now, if you've got some players, your best runner might be at 10 and off they go. Well, that's going to happen. But if we can encourage that, that's great. Now, playoff free pass, what we've got to avoid here is is the bun fight. That means it's my turn, it's my turn. No, you pass me the ball, you pass me the ball. So my tactical focus here is I give my 8 players the following letters: A, B, B, C, C, D, D. At every free pass, which is start off a score, we set up in attack A and A. So 1A's got the ball, and 1A will be the first receiver. B, B, C, C, D, D. And that's your free pass for the first 3 or 4 free passes. That means that you don't have an argument on who's going to get the ball, and you start. Remember that A has got to be standing still. So if he's got to be standing still, instead of him moving behind, I would just, if this is, say, the halfway line, here's your first player, and here's your second player. They stand on the same line. And so he just passes the ball to him flat 1 meter. Not passing backwards, he can see them, and there's no problems. They don't have to pass, they can run off themselves, and then they've got B next to them, and then C, then D. You're not talking about wingers or anything like that. After 3 or 4 goes, depending on your substitutions, you're just saying, right, we're going to have a new A, new B, new C, new D, and it means that players are going to have different roles. And within one game, it may be that you only get through, say, 3/4 rotations of that, because they're short games, or one game. That's fine, because next week you'll have noted down who's the AA and the BB and the CC and the DD, and they get another chance. Otherwise, what we're going to have is the same players, the greedy players, the ones who shout the loudest, they're going to get the ball. Let's just give them a chance. And that's a pretty good defensive unit to set up. So in defense, we're going to set up AA, BB, CC, DD. If you want to win games, of course, you're not thinking of that. You're only thinking of development. But should you have the game that you need to win because it's that you're up against the coaches that you most want to beat, then your best defenders are AA. Your next best defenders are at BB. And that's just a simple one. And then you're probably the DDs are just where I was put when I was a kid because I couldn't tackle either. So in terms of attack strategy, my only strategy is let's think about what I call passing rate. And let's try and get as many passes in as we possibly can. And that means that even if it's to the detriment of winning a game, even if it means that we drop the ball more times than we should, let's really celebrate the fact we got lots of passes in. It doesn't mean that everyone's got to touch the ball. It doesn't mean that we need to get a certain amount of passes in before we score a try. But the more we can pass, the better. And the really great thing to do is to see if we can pass out of the tackle or even from the ground. And that is for me, remember we talked about in blocks, out of the tackle, from the ground, that is post-Christmas. I know it's absolutely dreadful weather, but post-Christmas, if we can start to get something like that, we get these in. Brilliant. So what's the shape of training? I'm going to guess you're going to have an hour to 90 minutes a week. If you can, I mean, some teams will be playing quite a lot of games, but you need to play games. You need to play against other teams just because it breaks it up. It assesses the players, gives them different chances to do different things. But if you're going to have training, as I said, scrum 5 minutes. Every week, 5 minutes on profiles. Because as you've seen, the profiles lead into the rucks. Skills-wise, remember we're building in blocks. So focus on one part of the skill. Don't focus on the whole skill, focus on one part, because otherwise we're going to get lost in the detail and the player's going to, you're going to give me 15 things to remember. So for tackle, it could be week 1, we want to make sure we get a grip right. Week 2, it's footwork to get close. Week 3, it's leg drive. And then we repeat. Let's try and see how we get on getting those right before we do anything else. So you've got a bit of tackle focus, and you should be doing tackling every session. And it doesn't have to be full on, but you definitely want to get one of these bits in every session. Handling will be happening all the time, so you're definitely going to be doing some handling, and you're going to be doing some contact work. But this is where I think you need to make it real. So the contact work needs to be 5 mins max. We're going to do 5 minutes on bear crawling over the ball, 5 minutes on ball placement. Ball placement, I'll talk about ball placement after I've finished going through this. Ball placement will be very important here. But let's do it as many times as we can in something which looks like the game. Now, not the whole session doesn't need to be one long game. That would be actually quite boring. What would be good would be lots of slightly different games, but they don't have to be complicated. They can be very simple. They can be slices of the game. Let's play a 6v3. Let's play in here a 4v7. So in here, it's an attack focus. Good handling will probably mean that we do well. These players might be having to make more tackles. In this game, these players will have a chance to make more tackles, and these players will have to try and retain possession. And it could just do realistic starts. We're going to do a free pass from here. We're going to do a scrum with, if you got the right numbers, from here. Let's have a look at what this would look like from here. And that's why you want to put contact into the game as much as possible, but not over a long distance. So if you've got one team setting up one end here, another team setting up this end here, and they're running 10 meters to smash into each other, you're going to lose quite a lot of players in terms of enjoyment quite quickly. If you want to play contact, play on a very, very, I can't think of the word is now, shallow pitch, very shallow pitch, maybe 10 meters at most, but wide. Alternatively, play in a very, very tight area, but they start very close together. So they get lots of contact chances, and you can give them chances to experiment. Now, this is not about discovery learning, because they can't discover how to tackle. They've got to learn how to tackle. They've got to learn how to ruck. It's not discovery learning. They are discovering what works for them after you've given them the idea. So I need to get my head in here. So I understand that. When we're teaching tackling, we never talk about safe technique. We talk about good technique. Safe means to them, oh, there's danger. So we're not discovering safe technique. We know what safe techniques looks like. Let's see how it's going to work for me. I'm slightly taller than this player. I'm slightly shorter. I'm slightly rounder. I'm slightly thinner. So what have I got to do? So the more times we can have it looks like the game, they can discover with us, guiding them to how they can use those skills. So gone a bit over. I mean, 10s I could talk for ages about. I absolutely love this age group in terms of coaching them, partly because of the massive challenges in trying to rip out lots of rugby in order to allow them to play rugby, which seems slightly strange. But the thing is, we can get very obsessed with highly technical areas for players who have got not the bodies or the minds necessarily yet to do it. So this is why I work in blocks. So small steps which they can understand. Try and get the contact into games as much as possible to give them chances to learn contact. Well, actually, two people in consecutive webinars asked me about aggression. You can't automatically or turn a switch for players to make them more aggressive. But what you can do is if you make them more confident in contact, that allows them to express themselves. And that might be some form of aggression. But if you're not confident, you don't know, you don't feel safe in what you're trying to do, then you're unlikely to be able to put yourself into the firing line and make those tackles or clear those rucks. Passing rate, just encourage more passes. Don't make it a thing. Don't make it a tight right. We want to have 4 passes every time in this game. That's not practical. It's not realistic. It's not a game. But the more that they're encouraged to pass, the better. Now, that doesn't mean we're shouting from the sideline, pass, pass, pass. Absolutely not. It means that we just say, were you able to pass? Could we have passed a bit more? That sort of thing. And finally, in terms of team management, rotate every player, give them equal game time. Don't give them halves, give them equal game time. It saves an enormous amount of parental pressure if every parent knows that when their child turns up, if you've got 12 players at the game, everyone's got a number. So 1 to 8, you're starting. And then after 5 minutes, 9 to 12 will come on and place 1 to 4. And then 1 to 4 will come up and replace 5 to 8. And you just rotate like that. And it just means that everybody gets equal time. And at the end of a match, if you've lost the game, you don't ever say we've lost the game. Did everyone play? Yes. And that's the most important thing. Now, absolutely, you never go onto a pitch to lose a game of rugby, but what you do go onto rugby is to win the small steps that you've made. Right, we've improved here, we've improved here, we've improved here. This is great. And it's all leading to potentially us scoring tries. And if it helps us score tries or stop tries, then that's great. And I'm not saying absolutely keep scores. Absolutely great, we won the game today. and you can talk about it, but the things that you'll be focusing on, I'm sure you'll be doing, is turn around and say, right, we wanted to be better at this. Johnny, you did this really well. Matt, you did this really well. Dan, you did this really well. And then these are the positives you can get out of it. Right, so I've gone on for longer than I wanted on that. I know that I was going to pick up on something in a moment, which is ball placement. But that's the sort of the end of what I wanted to get through. Is there anyone who wants to ask me any questions before I jump on to ball placement? Just take yourself off mute is probably the best way.
Dan, can I ask a question about the rip?
Yeah.
So when we talked earlier about the tackle and the second player coming in has the opportunity to rip the ball off the ball carrier.
Yeah.
I'm uncertain as to whether to coach for that, given that those two have now got their heads close to each other. And the challenge that poses for that arriving player potentially getting themselves into a difficult position.
I think that you're right to be potentially concerned about the heads in the same place. I think, and what the rugby lawmakers have understood is that, say, the pick and go is okay in the game above. When you're allowed to pick and go. So if a player picks and goes, which is really they're dipping, that's absolutely fine because it's a low level or low chance of a big impact. So I would say that there's a chance that they're going to knock heads, but it's going to be such a low chance that that would be not the concern I would have. But I can see why there's a potential. I think it's a choice in terms of coaching the players to rip. And I wouldn't put it high on my list of skills to do early on. I think I might bring it in later on. I think it's more important that we focus on tackling number one. And that would be the first thing I would do. And then maybe when we get to Christmas, let's start thinking about ripping. You're going to come across other teams which are going to rip. That's fine. We can't do everything. I think it's a great question for two reasons. One is that with the new tackle laws, we are thinking about it, and the second one is that it's about balancing the things that you can do and try and get those done well, and then what's the order of things. So hopefully that gives a sort of starting point, Simon, on that one. Right, let's jump in on Andy's question. So Andy's asked, any tips for encouraging girls to continue play at this tougher mixed age group? Well, of course, they're not far off being able to play in the non-mixed teams. I think it's next year, if my memory serves me right. So it is very much about recognizing the different skill sets that every player can bring. One of the things that we're often told is rugby is a game for all shapes and sizes. And this is something that we should talk about to the players, not to the girls, but to say, right, so some of you are going to be running around sidestepping and racing around. That's great. But some of you are going to be doing this, this, and this. And we need every player to do this. I'm not going to be at the end of the game saying, we scored 3 tries. Well done, Dan, you scored all 3 tries. I'm going to be saying, I'm going to go around and I'm going to say, Andy, I noticed that you made 3 rucks. Andy, I noticed that you passed before contact, or Andy, I noticed that your ball placement was outstanding. And that there is all those skills add up. And that is how I would encourage. I know that girls will feel nervous about the contact area, and so the small-sided games hopefully will give them a little bit more confidence. But it is definitely trying to treat just as much as you would, and something that is a very hard thing to do, even in the classroom for experienced teachers, is this idea of differentiation. if that is spelt correctly. I think so. So what do you do with different levels of skill? And the first thing is everyone gets the same diet. That's the first thing. Don't give anyone different diets. It's how much they want to eat from that diet is up to them. So some of them you'll see, right, we're going to learn tackling, we're going to work on this one. Now, if they go into a game and don't tackle, well, to some extent, that's their choice. So everyone gets the same, whether a girl, boy, speedy, can't catch, never tackles, they get the same. You then use by your coaching craft to encourage them when things aren't going so well, or to praise them when things have gone well, and maybe to think about whether they can do something a little bit faster or in a different way. And the other thing is to help players to look after each other. So they take charge of the supporting each other. That's a hell of a thing to do at 9. It would be wonderful if every 9-year-old was able to shake each other's hand and look after each other. However, if we can encourage that by saying, if someone goes wrong, what can you say? Then that's a sort of thing that we can build in. So, and I wish there was a magic wand, a special jelly bean that I could offer on that. But hopefully that gives us sort of some ideas. Yeah. All right. No Michael video. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry about that. Having people on the video is sometimes as distracting as the people on the mic. But that's not to say that people on the being distracting on the videos.
Dan, can I ask a question quickly? So we've had a few Tuesday sort of pre-season sessions, bit of fun, get the kids back together, just around the rucking area. So we've used a few of your drills on the website around introducing rucking, and what we found is they naturally want to put their hands on the ball from both sides. Would you actively discourage it so that they get into the habit of forming a ruck? And secondly, in order to try and combat that, we've encouraged them to sort of, as we did in seniors, sort of grip onto the shirt of your player on the floor to sort of form a ruck. How would you tackle the hands on the ball situation?
Right. Well, I'll go to your second part first. And my preference is to try and avoid putting the hands on the player, full stop. And there's a couple of reasons, and this is my view on this, and you'll certainly come across coaches who will encourage players to put hands on the ball, on the player. So here's the player presenting the ball, and the next arriving player puts their hands down on the player on the ground. Now, I've obviously got their shoulders a bit higher than you'd expect.
Yeah.
What happens is this starts to ingrain poor habits, because generally then players tend to go this way into the ruck because they know they want to get their hands on the player. Really, what we want to try and encourage the players to do as much as possible is to arrive in a scrum profile over the ball. And the reason being is that if a player arrives then and they are able to move towards that player, just the sort of physics of F equals MA, for those, it's a bit of a mathematical journey here as well with Pythagoras and F equals MA. If a player arrives with momentum and you're static, then you're more likely to be knocked backwards than if you are in a positive position to go forward. Now, of course, if you're holding on to the player, you will go backwards with the player on the ground. Now, yes, that's true, but that means that you're all moving backwards and you're not really encouraging fast ball. So, yeah, there's a trade-off. I think arrive on your feet and above the ball, hips above the ball. I call it hobbing, hips over the ball. I call it hobbing. When I was coaching men's, before I started coaching women's, we call it bobbing, but started coaching women, so we call it hobbing. So it's hips rather than the B over the ball. And that means that they've got their power, their hips over the ball ready to come forward. Now, The next thing is, do you get the defender, the first arriving defender, to jackal for the ball? I think it's what you're suggesting, which means go for the ball, get their hands on the ball. I think at the start, you're much better off just focusing on this scrum profile, getting players to arrive in a scrum profile over the ball. And as they get this as a good habit, and this becomes more ingrained, then you do the slightly more sophisticated areas of whether we should go for the ball or not. So remember we talked in blocks here. So if our rucking block, block one is, well, actually it's ball placement, good ball placement. Then we need to get profile over the ball. Then we want to get low arriving into profile. And then we want to get fast arriving, so we are the first to the ball. Once we've done all those things, if we can do all those things, then we might start thinking about a ball focused position. And you can, all these things are great, but remember, a 9-year-old is rucking for their very first time. 1 or 2 of them will be absolutely brilliant ruckers. They will get it straight away. They'll have seen it on the television. They'll be saying, well, I've seen, well, I'm guessing where in the world you are. I suppose so, Tom Curry or someone like that. They'll be focused on, and they'll do it. But most players need to think, right, I need to get my ball placement right. And I'll just talk about it in a moment. Then I need to get my profile right. So I'm arriving, so I'm not going off my feet. Then I get the power in my arrival, so I'm arriving low. So that's the bear crawl, and then we're getting to fast arriving, which is the decision making. This is the hard bit. This is the ball. The player's gone to ground. Am I in the best position? So I think Andy, it's great you've asked. Sorry, it's not Andy. Matthew, it's great you're asking these questions because. And as you said, in the seniors, so your mindset is exactly on where they're going to be when they're finishing rucking. And as I said earlier, the real problem for me when I was coaching at this level is to try my very best. And I didn't get it right a lot of the time. And it's only after 30 years of coaching I can be confident to say I get it right a bit better now, is to try and take that out and say, let's get this right first. And then this right. Now, if you come up against sides who are ahead of you on the curve, I wouldn't worry. It's not down to bad coaching because you know you're going through a process. Number 2, often the sides which look like the best sides and the most organized sides they've just got 1 or 2 players who are already well-formed rugby players. They just come like that. So I wouldn't worry about that. It's, am I getting everybody moving up together? Some players are going to get faster. Remember, same diet though. Every player can get a great ball placement. Every player is fantastic profile over the ball. Every player is low arriving. Every player is fast arriving. You can get those in 2 years' time. The teams which have got 2 or 3 players who are brilliant over the ball will struggle because they will only be able to get to 1 in every 3 rucks, and then you'll be laughing all the way, and you'll be winning all the leagues, all the cups, and no, you just the satisfaction of having those players. So, I answered your first question, your second question first. I think I might have answered your first question second.
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, really, very much so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I think the thing is that I'm definitely going to do a tackle webinar coming up quite quickly in the start of the season, and I'm going to come and do rucks because it is a really tough area to get right, especially the decision making around it. So yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So I'm going to come on to the ball placement thing now. Right, the 5% ball placement is the long place. That's the 5% ball placement. Your 95% one, the one that you should be coaching the most, is the jackknife. So that ball placement, you're playing this way. Now, there are advantages to this one. Gate and distance. But first of all, I'm going to make the gate is going to be irrelevant. And it's because this. I hope I can be able to illustrate this correctly. So here is the player putting you're playing this way down the field, and you put the ball back here. So your gate, vary the colors. This is the width of the gate. So the opposition have got to come through that very narrow area to get the ball. They've got miles to go, but that's the width of the gate. Now, any other situation, so let's say the player sets up like this, and they've even got their legs out like, and they place the ball like this. So roughly the same scale. I'm not cheating with the width there. That's the width of the gate. So a player can arrive at any point in this gate to get to the ball. However, in the speed of the game, this is what the referee will see. A player arrives through here. So that's absolutely legal. They turn to reach for the ball. Sorry, that's their head. That's not there. They turn to reach for the ball. Where are their hips facing? Well, they look like they're coming from the wrong angle. All the referees can see is the ball and players arriving at the ball here. So really, that's what the referees will see. It will take a super sophisticated referee to think that a player has come through here and then turns and gets the ball. So I wouldn't worry about the width of the gate. So that's what makes the long placement. First of all, the argument for long placement is nothing to do with the gate. The argument for the long placement is it takes the ball a long way away from the opposition. And that's very true. That's absolutely spot on. But that also means that if the tackle has happened here, first of all, the player's got to have a super amazing core to be able to twist back and pass that way. But also, if this is the gain line, you are now the width of the body away from the gain line. You've stretched all that way back from the gain line. Whereas with the, here's the tackle here. So you've stretched back not so far. It's much easier to stretch back. And it's much easier for the player to control the ball. So I would use the jackknife ball placement as the #1 ball placement I would spend 95% of my time encouraging. 5% of the time you'll see this. You'll see in the internationals, most of the time that there's a long ball placement is when they've lost the tackle or they're going backwards. So that's what I would focus on the ball placement. And I'm pretty sure on the site somewhere I've got something on that. Now, one great way to train it, I call it the Sean Holly drill. It's on the site, and hopefully I'll remember to, but this is how it works. You have 4 players here. And 4 players here. They're about 2 meters apart here. And a very short, they're about maybe a meter or so apart here, maybe a bit wider. The players are passing the ball along the line to each other, to here, to here, to here, to here. Then the ball comes across to this player who passes the ball along here. So they're passing the ball around in this circle. Once they've got that, you just get them to move backwards and forwards very, very slowly. But they move as a line, so as a group. And then let's say this player here is on the ball, you shout go. And this player has got to try and beat the player in front of them and get through the gap. Now, remember, there's not much of a gap. They're not very far apart, so it's very likely a tackle's going to happen. And then you've got a race to win the ball. So how many players are allowed in from each side? So either this player here or this player here will have to come in. But you can manage that, and one of these players will have to come in, and one of these or this player here will have to come in. The kids absolutely love that game because you can get a lot of action in. there is a bit of pressure to make this tackle here, and they may not make it, but there's not very much distance between them. So there's not much place for this player to run through. Obviously, you match the people up. You don't want your Binny Vonipola here and your George Ford opposite them. You don't want to have that situation. So you can match the players up. And it gives them an excellent opportunity to see the 1v1. So this player or this player might race in, but you're going to have to say, no, you've got to get out. And this player might race in. As this player races in, you say, no, you've got to get out. So 1v1. Can't remember what I've called it on the site. Obviously, if I haven't, when I send this webinar out, if I haven't said what it is, just say, Dan, you said the Sean Holly drill, and you haven't told me what it is. I will tell you which one it is. And I've got a feeling that on the site, the video is an actual under 10 side doing it. So, and as I say, they loved it. Okay, I'm staying online. So if anyone wants to ask any more questions, feel free. You're allowed to ask more than one question. So if you've asked one, you haven't had your one allocation question used up. So if you want to ask, far away.
Dan, another question.
Yep.
We're quite fortunate that we've got a handful, as you mentioned, a handful of very sort of good natural rugby players. When it comes to pairing them up, what we found is that the lads who are, and the one girl who is very good get really frustrated when you pair them up with kids who aren't as strong as them. Do you persist? Would you persist with that, or would you put them against someone competing in a sort of ruck environment against someone who's at the same standard as them?
Well, first of all, it's very understandable that they get frustrated, and it's quite a hard lesson for them to learn at 9 to work with people who are not as good as them, and we certainly don't want to force it on them all the time. It needs to be. I would definitely suggest it's a balance. I would mix them a bit, but also I would get them to work with players of their own ability also. However, it's how you manage it. Certainly known with my son, this was really hard to manage. He would not want to do this, but I think you make it part of growing as a team. And if a good player is going with a weaker player, then you're adding in words like, and what I really want to see from you here is how you can help them to improve. But I wouldn't do it all the time. It just needs to be. Remember that I've said talking about 5-minute skills sessions.
Yeah.
So and in a pairing up, it could be 2.5. There's only a short space of time. If that makes sense, but yeah. That is the way that I would do it. I recognize that it may be that they will be frustrated for that 2.5 minutes, even if you set it right. However, over in the long term, it does pay off. Certainly from a teaching, a cognitive science learning situation, it's better to mix sometimes because the players then learn to teach others. So that's very powerful for them. So they get better at it, and the weaker player will obviously get a chance to be a bit more challenged. However, you also want to match them up so they are up against better players. The trouble is sometimes if a couple of good players get together, it can cause or form a bit of a clique, and that we do see that, and it needs to be avoided.
Yeah.
Not straightforward, all that. And I think we have to, as coaches, recognize that those are the tough bits. And even experienced, good coaches who've been doing it for a long time will know that these things may not work as well as they want to, but they know it's worth it in the long run, even if they've got to have a bit of pain in the short run.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Anyone else want to ask any questions? Please feel free, unmute yourself or ask in the chat box.
Can I check a point on the rules, Dan? I think
Yeah.
it might be in the regs, but maybe not entirely clear. And I think you talked earlier about the pick and go. So is the 9 still expected to make a pass,
Yeah,
or are they still protected at this level, or
Yeah,
as
definitely.
this age group? Or?
Sorry, yes, definitely. You've got to pass away. I probably should have said this. You've got to pass away from scrums and rucks and mauls.
Yeah.
They have to do that. And I think that stops at under 12s.
Okay.
So I probably, when I was doing the under 12s thing, I forgot to mention that, but that is a difference. Yes, they definitely got to pass. That's why, though I didn't say it, I did say that the 9 pass, the sit and shoot thing, is a really important thing that everybody gets used to doing it. You're probably going to have players who are going to do that more often than others, but every player should be encouraged. And in games, let's say you've got a game set up like this, and you might say, we'll play, just for the sake of argument, we'll play touch tackle. As soon as the ball goes down, is presented. So presented, you have got 3 seconds to pass the ball away. And that means that you can't wait for someone who's a preferred passer to come in and do it. So that's one way. The next way is to actually say in a game, we're going to have, and if you can bib them up, that's even easier. This player here and this player here are the only 2 players who are allowed to pass the ball away. Now, you don't necessarily make them the best passers, but they have to be the ones who pass away. And if they don't pass away, then within 3 seconds, then you lose the ball. And then these players are then forced to work on this this skill of passing the ball away from the contact area. And then after 3 or 4 minutes, these 2 players are the players who've got to pass the ball away.
That's useful, because I think what we find is the players kind of divide. You get the ones who want to run with the ball and want to receive the ball, and equally the ones who aren't so confident with the running ball. They're quite happy to go into a situation to get the ball and pass it away, because they know they can't be tackled. So it's finding that balance between.
Yeah, right. I didn't think that that one. No one's ever said that if you pass the ball away, you're not going to get tackled. So that's interesting. I didn't think that. So just to develop that, what you've just said made me think. The next thing is that in the same situation, you might say, well, these 2 players are the players who are going to pass the ball away, and these players here are going to be the designated first receivers, and they're always going to be the first receivers, because otherwise, what happens is that there's almost a fight to be in that first receiver position.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just encourage those to be the first receivers, and then swap them around, and then every player gets that chance. Now, again, you're going to have to be think about this, because some players absolutely don't want to be the first receiver, and it'll be the worst thing that can happen to them, because they're not so confident. So yeah, maybe they don't get to do that. You just have to choose your moments with them and ask them to do other things. Yeah, so great, Paul. Great point, Paul. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Thank you.
Just in a similar way, when you're teaching the rucking, normally it would be the sort of closest players that go into the ruck.
Yeah.
How do you sort who is the closest player? Because some of my kids would turn and get out of there, basically.
Well, first of all, it's a hell of a lot of it's about awareness. And they've never rucked before. They never had to make choices to go into rucks. And I don't know whether you've experienced of coaching older players or groups above, even 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. But the choice to go into ruck is still a massive awareness piece for them. So this is why I quite like this Sean Holly exercise, because it makes it quite clear that probably the person who's passed the ball is probably most likely to be the one who's going to the ruck. So that's a good exercise to use. This ball presentation one's quite a good one, because you present, and then you must have someone to go over in a profile position, and then you get the ball away, and then you've got that countdown. So tackle 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. If they haven't got a player of that ball, then it's a turnover. Or actually, I don't use turnovers now. I use 3 lives. And I'll tell you why I use 3 lives. It's because if you lose a life, you've still got another 2 lives to rectify your mistake.
Right.
So we lose a life, and you might shout, "Oh, damn, you idiot, we lost a life." We hope they don't say that. "You idiot, we've lost a life." But it doesn't mean they've turned over the ball. It means that don't do it again. We've still got 2 lives to make sure that we don't do that again. So instead of turning over the ball, they've got chances to get the skill right. And because once they've done it 3 times, then it's enough of a consequence for them to try and get it right next time.
Do you think it's worth doing it at sort of walking pace as well? Just
Yeah, well, I'm delighted you said that, because when I would do the tackle stuff, is that I would do a lot of tackling at walking pace, but they won't go to ground, but we focus on the grip and the footwork. And I don't think there's any harm in doing walking pace for the players if you do it a little and often, because they get used to it. You do it the first time and they muck around and they'll do silly walks and that sort of stuff. But if you give them enough consequence in terms of the scoring side keep the ball, that's always a good consequence, because the defense will work harder. Then you've got lives, and then they've got more chance. So slow motion is I think it's a good way for them to get that understanding.
great, thank you.
That's all right. Anyone else want to jump in? I'm quite happy. I can stay here all night, so you're allowed to go. You don't have to wait for me to shut down. You're allowed to go anytime. But if anyone wants to ask any more questions, and of course, obviously, you've got my email, so the conversation doesn't stop here. But there might be something that's come to mind, and you want to jump in now, so feel free.
We're all going now. Just on the walking thing, my strategy for the beginning of the season was to actually have a walking game type situation, where the attacker's ball carrier has to walk, but his teammates can run to space around it, but the defense has to walk back the other way on quite a tight field.
All right, okay.
So it does kind of what you said by making them get into line and tackle, and we could introduce the rucks and things as well. Do you think there's any mileage in that?
Yeah, well, well, first of all, I've never done it, but I like the idea, and I like the idea because in walking rugby, the one of the main problems is that the ball should technically move faster than the players, so you might find it hard to keep up with the ball. But I like that idea, so the players can be in position. Walking rugby is quite good because it does give enough momentum for a player to go down and present the ball, or pass out of the tackle, and actually it gives them a chance to pass out of the tackle. I'd love to hear back on how you think it's gone, or if you've got any clips of it, then that would be even better, because I've never done it. It sounds like it could work, and it may take a bit of patience to see if it works all the way through. But the more we got the players on their feet making tackles, the much better they'll become at transferring that into games. Because though we want to encourage the players, so to make a low tackle, there's this slight myth I've discovered that we want to get the foot in close. We don't want to get the foot in close, because if the foot's in close, so if I get my foot in close to the tackler here, there's my foot in close, it's very hard to then get low. It's much better if I get my foot not so close, but my knee going downwards to make the tackle, because then I'm coming forwards to make the tackle. So we used to say get your foot in close, but actually we want the knee to be coming downwards. But we don't want our players to be tackling on their knees, because then they lose all their power. And the second thing is they lose their dynamic ability to maneuver. So if I'm on my knees, I can move my body about that much. But if a player moves quite a lot, then I'm finding it very hard to move my body and therefore my head. So that's why I like walking rugby as a precursor to speeding it up. And yeah, certainly you're
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. No, I'd be really interested to see how it goes. It sounds like a good idea.
What's the Dan? What's your view on tackle shields and tackle bags?
It's there's good and bad to them. I think at this age, the tackle pads are quite good for a bit of contact confidence, running around, smashing into pads. Because certainly the ball carrier needs to just be a bit more confident in contact. Technically, I don't think they help an enormous amount at this age, because they don't see the things that they don't have the right cues to tackle, because they're not used to it, and therefore, as I said, I think earlier, I can't remember who I said earlier on to. So a 10-year-old is being a 9-year-old is being tackling for 1 season and not making that many tackles. So they're tackling this target here. So they're not used to this target moving around. So we've got to give them as many chances as we can to tackle that target. Now, when you're up to maybe you've been tackling for a long time, tackle tubes and tackle pads are a good chance for you to get some reps in to do some of the technical stuff, maybe around footwork or grip, that you haven't had a chance to do, and you don't want to take too many knocks. But I mean, first of all, kids have got to hold the tackle pads, not you. So just imagine the mayhem which ensues from that. And the tackle tubes are always too big. I think they're a bit of fun, definitely. Throw them in for that. So that's I think at this age, that's my view. When you get to senior rugby, or chances where you don't want to wear the players out by bashing into each other, then they do have a purpose. I mean, what do you think?
I haven't used them in any sessions. I've seen a few video clips and a few different bits where they have been used. They're not. But for that reason, actually, they don't give you any sense of reality. Like, even when you make them run into it and then fall to place the ball back, it just doesn't look anything like reality.
Yeah, I mean, I've used them a bit to actually have a landing spot. We were doing some stuff last week with passing as you're falling, and the grounds were quite hard, so the players were able to fall and pass at the same time. And one of the things, and World Rugby's got some really good stuff on contact confidence, about how players can help themselves to fall and learn how to fall. So sometimes having a bit of a soft landing gives them a bit more confidence. But yeah, I think also it's when you get to training, I don't know how many other sides are at training, but it tends to be a bit of a race to see if we can get the tackle pads and tackle tubes first. I would say that there are other things you can do before you get those out at under 10s.
Yeah, great.
Any ideas on the ones who are overconfident in tackling, going like a bull in a china shop?
Well, that's the differentiation piece. So one of the difficulties is that you'll get players who probably siblings. They've got older brothers, so they're used to fighting and scrapping for everything, and therefore they're very contact confident. So they're the kids you see on the YouTube video who make 12 tackles in the space of about 3 minutes while everyone else watches. So with them, it is a lot of it is trying to, because we're talking. Remember, I talked about the same diet.
Mm.
Now they're going to be using that diet, and they're going to be feeding from the diet from the table quite a lot more than everybody else. So there, you're looking for a much higher degree of accuracy, and that's really what you want to do, because if they're more accurate, they can be more powerful in the tackle. The difficulty is that they tend to throw themselves in and get their heads in the wrong place, or not grip properly, and the other thing is that they can become you might use the term tackle champion, or you might have another word which is more suitable for 9-year-olds, whatever is they're watching at the moment on television. And
Some of them are liability.
yeah, and so yeah, and they as a tackle champion, they're then right. We're going to go over to the tackle champion or a tackle champion to give us a demonstration, or I want you to, as a tackle champion, I want you to give the best tip you can for this player, and you're listening in on this tip, and then you can feed back to them. Said that's a great thing you've said there, or actually, let's think about that tackle, because they might have given them oh, I always close my eyes when I tackle, and you say, all right, well, now I've found out that they always close their eyes. This might be something that they need to change. Again, it would be great if we have. I mean, somewhere on the site I'd give a sort of a range of tacklers that you'll have, and you have the least technical manic tackler, and then you have a very technical aggressive tackler, and one is obviously effective and one is dangerous. And that dangerous one is the one that you need to probably work with the tackle champion and say, look, you need to be doing this, this, and this, or the tackle champion says, look, you need to be doing this.
Just on that, a question for everyone's opinion. I've been discouraging some of the lads to wear shoulder pads at that age, so they kind of get understand the feeling of tackling and being tackled. Because I remember playing with a couple of lads back home in Wales who wore shoulder pads, and they just ran at anything. They ran at a bus because the shoulder pads kind of mask that reality. So I discourage it. What would your view be?
I think it comes down to the players that you've got. So my lad wears them, for example, but he's quite diddy, and it's more of a confidence thing. Whereas I would say my 3 or 4 best tacklers, or strongest tacklers, I should say, on my team, I'm pretty sure don't wear them. So I think I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's a little bit like the tackle bags. It's something to maybe give players a bit of a placebo boost more than anything.
Yeah,
I haven't come across them at all.
in
Any of the teams we've played or our team.
I think sometimes they wear them because they see their heroes on the television wearing them. I mean, my son, I said, coached him from 6 to 16, and he'll laugh that I've told this story. Playing tag rugby, he had gum shield, shoulder pads, and head guard. Just playing tag because that's what everyone was wearing. And I think that it's an interesting old journey in the head of a 9-year-old on why they're wearing the shoulder pads, because it might be their choice, and it might be one of their parents saying, I feel that you should be wearing as much protection as you possibly can. But I think that actually, Matt, the thing you've said is almost at the start of the season, you should be saying, here are the pros and cons to the parents of shoulder pads and head guards. And then it helps them make a more informed choice, because I think some parents think that the head guard will reduce concussion, for instance, and obviously it doesn't. But it's good because it does reduce the chances of cuts or bang your ear. And well, in a cold weather, when a child hurts their ear, that you've lost them for the rest of the game. So yeah, these little things there. I mean, in the old days, I saw a couple of clips of Sorevi, one of the great players of all time. He was wearing one of those little nose things to make him breathe easier. I mean, whatever happened to them? And how many players wear gloves these days? So, yeah, yeah, I don't think I think I wore a nose thing once or twice, but I was always tired anyway, so it didn't help me out. I think that's actually a really interesting thing to ask overall. And actually, another thing we're going to do is going to put up some forums on the site. So those are the sorts of questions which, you know, from experience, people will be sharing, and you know, different views on it. I don't think there's a right. Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong. It doesn't. It depends on whereabouts in Wales are you facing these mountains tackling buses?
Up in North Wales, up in Anglesey.
Oh, well, yeah, all right. Okay. So that's a different sort of Wales altogether to the soft southern parts of Wales.
No, absolutely.
No.
It's the opposite in England.
Anything else? As I said, I'm happy to stay online as long as one or just feel if you want to leave. Don't feel that you need to stay in.
I'm going to show off. Thanks, though. It's been really
fantastic. Yeah,
Matt, thanks very much. Thanks for your contributions as well. Really helpful.
Yeah. Cheers, boys. Nice to meet you all. Take care.
Yeah, Andrew, take care. Yeah,
all the
thanks, Dan.
yeah. Thanks, Dan. Much
Thanks very much,
appreciated.
guys.
Really
Thanks.
useful. Thank you.
I don't know how I leave.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to be turning off now. Thanks all for coming along, and we'll catch up soon. Bye-bye.